the heart of Seoul's bustling Hongdae district, where neon lights painted the night in brilliant colors and the air hummed with the energy of youth and dreams, lived two people whose hearts were bound by an impossible situation. Kim Ji-hoon was 29, with the kind of understated handsomeness that made people look twice. Sharp cheekbones, expressive dark eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an easy smile that had once charmed Seoul National University's literature department. Now, 3 years after graduation, he worked as a best-selling novelist, his romantic stories ironically born from a heart that had known both great love and devastating loss. Park Mina was 25, 4 years younger than her sister Soyeon had been, but carrying herself with a grace that belied her age. Where Soyeon had been vibrant and bold, Mina was quietly beautiful, like moonlight compared to her sister's sunshine. Her long black hair framed delicate features, and her eyes held depths of sadness that she tried to hide behind gentle smiles and busy schedules at the art gallery where she worked as a curator. They had met 2 years ago at Soyeon's funeral. The memory still haunted Ji-hoon, standing in that sterile funeral home, staring at the woman he had loved and lost, when a younger version of her face appeared beside the casket. Mina had looked up at him with eyes swollen from crying, and for a moment his heart had stopped. She looked so much like Soyeon, yet entirely different. Where Soyeon had been fire, Mina was water, calm, deep, quietly powerful. "You must be Ji-hoon," she had said softly, her voice carrying none of Soyeon's musical laughter, but holding its own haunting beauty. "Unnie talked about you all the time." That had been their beginning. Two broken people finding solace in their shared grief, united by their love for someone who was gone forever. The relationship that followed was built on borrowed time and borrowed guilt. They met for coffee on rainy afternoons, ostensibly to share memories of Soyeon, but really because being together felt like coming home to a place neither knew they'd been searching for. They walked through Namsan Park, visited the bookstores. In Myeongdong, sat by the Han River watching the city lights reflect on the dark water. For months, they convinced themselves it was just friendship, two people helping each other heal. But friendship didn't explain why Ji-hoon's pulse quickened every time his phone buzzed with her messages. It didn't explain why Mina found herself choosing her clothes more carefully on days she knew she'd see him, or why she'd started reading his novels, treasuring every word he'd written. The moment everything changed was on a cold February evening, exactly 1 year after Soyeon's death. They had visited her grave together, leaving white chrysanthemums and sharing stories they'd told 100 times before. Afterward, they found themselves at a small pojangmacha, a street food stall, sharing soju and trying to warm themselves against the bitter Seoul winter. "She would have loved this," Mina said, gesturing at the bustling street around them. "Unnie always said the best food in Seoul came from places like this, not fancy restaurants." Ji-hoon nodded, but his eyes were fixed on Mina's face in the lamplight. "She would have dragged us to 10 different stalls, insisting we try everything." They laughed together, the sound bittersweet in the cold air. Then their eyes met, and the laughter died away, replaced by something deeper, more dangerous. "Ji-hoon," Mina whispered, and he heard everything in that single word. The longing, the fear, the impossibility of what was happening between them. "I know," he said, reaching across the small table to touch her hand. "I know we shouldn't. I know it's wrong." "Is it wrong?" she asked, her fingers intertwining with his. "Or does it just feel wrong because we think it should?" He had no answer for that. All he knew was that when he looked at her, he didn't see Soyeon's sister. He saw Mina, beautiful, intelligent, kind Mina, who laughed at his terrible jokes and remembered how he liked his coffee, and made him feel alive again after months of feeling like he was drowning. They kissed that night, soft and hesitant, at first, then with growing passion as 2 years of suppressed feelings finally broke free. When they broke apart, both were crying. "What are we doing?" Mina asked, her forehead pressed against his. "I don't know," Ji-hoon admitted. "But I can't stop. I've tried to stay away from you, tried to convince myself that what I feel isn't real, But it is real, Mina. What I feel for you is real. That night marked the beginning of their secret relationship. A love affair conducted in shadows and silence, hidden from family and friends who would never understand. They met in quiet, cafes in neighborhoods where no one knew them, took walks in parks on the outskirts of the city, and spent stolen hours in Ji-hoon's apartment, talking and touching and pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. But secrets have a way of growing heavy, and guilt has a way of poisoning even the purest love. The first crack appeared 3 months later, at a family dinner Mina couldn't avoid. Her parents had invited their extended family to remember Soyeon on what would have been her 28th birthday. The table was set with all of Soyeon's favorite foods, and her photograph sat surrounded by white roses. "Mina ya," her mother said gently. "You've been looking better lately. More alive. I'm glad you're healing." Her father nodded approvingly. "Your sister would want you to be happy. She always worried that you were too serious, too focused on taking care of others instead of yourself." The guilt hit Mina like a physical blow. Here were her parents, still grieving their lost daughter, praising her for healing. If only they knew the source of that healing was the man their eldest daughter had loved. "Soyeon always said Ji-hoon would make someone very happy someday," her aunt added innocently. "Such a shame they broke up before. Well, before the accident. Do you ever see him, Mina? You two seemed close at the funeral." Mina nearly choked on her rice. "Sometimes," she managed to say. We share memories of Unni." It wasn't technically a lie, but it felt like one. Every shared glance, every carefully neutral response felt like a betrayal of her family's trust and her sister's memory. That night, she called Ji-hoon, her voice shaking with unshed tears. "I can't do this anymore," she said without preamble. "Mina, what happened? My family. They trust me. They think I'm healing in a healthy way, and instead We're what?" His voice was gentle but firm. "Mina, what are we doing that's so terrible? We're caring for each other. We're finding happiness after loss. Would Soyeon really want us to be miserable forever?" "But you loved her," Mina whispered. "You were going to marry her." The silence stretched between them, filled with all the complicated truths they'd been avoiding. "I did love her," Ji-hoon said finally. "I loved her completely. But she's gone, Mina. And what I feel for you, it's not the same thing. It's not a replacement or a substitute. It's something entirely different, something that exists independent of my history with Soyeon." "How can you be sure?" "Because when I look at you, I don't see her. I see you. Your kindness, your strength, the way you scrunch your nose when you're thinking hard about something. I see the woman who brings me books she thinks I'll like, who remembers that I hate mint chocolate but love anything with coffee. I see Mina, not Soyeon's sister." His words should have comforted her, but they only made the guilt worse, because she wasn't sure she could say the same thing. When she looked at Ji-hoon, did she see him clearly? Or did she see the man her sister had loved? The connection to Soyeon she wasn't ready to let go of. The doubt crept in like poison, tainting every sweet moment between them. When he held her hand, she wondered if he was remembering holding Soyeon's. When he whispered her name in the dark, she questioned whether some part of him was speaking to a ghost. The crisis came 6 months later, in the most unexpected way. Mina was organizing a memorial exhibition at her gallery. Love Letters, a tribute to young artists lost too soon. It was meant to honor Soyeon, who had been a promising photographer before the car accident that took her life. But as Mina went through her sister's belongings, preparing the display, she discovered something that shattered her world. Hidden in an old camera bag were letters, dozens of them, written in Soyeon's familiar handwriting. Love letters, but not to Ji-hoon. These were addressed to someone named M. Passionate, intimate letters that spoke of secret meetings and forbidden love. With trembling hands, Mina read letter after letter, piecing together the truth her sister had hidden from everyone. Soyeon had been having an affair for the last 6 months of her life. She'd been planning to break up with Jihoon, to leave him for this mysterious M who had captured her heart so completely. The final letter was dated just 3 days before the accident. My dearest M, I've decided to tell Jihoon tomorrow. I can't live this lie anymore. It's not fair to him, and it's not fair to us. He deserves to know the truth, even if it hurts him. And we deserve to be together openly, without hiding our love like it's something shameful. After tomorrow, we can finally start our real life together. I love you more than words can express. Forever yours, S. Mina sat on her sister's bedroom floor, surrounded by the debris of everything she thought she knew, and wept. Soyeon had been planning to leave Jihoon, the great love story she'd built. In her mind, the tragic romance cut short by fate had been a lie. Her sister had fallen out of love, had been preparing to break Jihoon's heart just days before her death. But there was more. As she continued searching through the letters, looking for some clue to M's identity, she found something else. A photograph tucked inside the camera bag. It showed Soyeon laughing in the arms of a man whose face was turned away from the camera. But Mina recognized the jacket he was wearing, the way he held himself. It was Professor Kang, Soyeon's photography instructor at the university. A married man 15 years older than her sister. The revelation hit Mina like a tidal wave. Her sister hadn't just been planning to leave Jihoon for another man. She'd been having an affair with her married professor. The perfect image of Soyeon that their family cherished, that Jihoon mourned, was based on lies. What was she supposed to do with this knowledge? How could she tell Jihoon that the woman he'd grieved for 2 years had been planning to abandon him? How could she tell her parents that their precious daughter had been involved with a married man? And most troubling of all, what did this mean for her relationship with Jihoon? Had their entire romance been built on a foundation of false guilt? If Soyeon had been planning to leave him anyway, was their love less forbidden than they'd thought? That night, Mina sat in her apartment, staring at the letters spread across her coffee table. Her phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Jihoon, wondering why she'd cancelled their dinner plans, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. Everything felt different now. The guilt that had shadowed their relationship suddenly seemed pointless. The secrecy felt ridiculous, but at the same time she felt angry. At Soyeon for the lies, at herself for building her life around those lies, at the situation that had no good solutions. When Jihoon finally showed up at her door, using the spare key she'd given him, months ago, he found her sitting in the dark, surrounded by the evidence of her sister's deception. Mina, what's wrong? You haven't answered your phone, and I was worried. He stopped when he saw the letters. What are these? She looked up at him, her face streaked with tears. The truth, she said simply. He read in silence, his face growing paler with each letter. When he finished, he sank onto the couch beside her, his head in his hands. She was going to leave me, he said finally, his voice hollow. Yes. For her professor, a married man. Yes. They sat in silence, processing the implications of what they'd discovered. I feel so stupid, Jihoon said finally. All this time I've been mourning this perfect love, carrying around all this guilt about moving on. But she had already moved on. She'd been planning to dump me. I'm sorry, Mina whispered. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Are you? He turned to look at her, his eyes intense. Are you really sorry? Because this changes everything, doesn't it? Mina felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? I mean, we've been torturing ourselves with guilt over nothing. Soyeon wasn't the perfect girlfriend I've been comparing you to. She wasn't the great love I thought I was betraying. She was just human, flawed, selfish, even. The bitterness in his voice scared her. Jihoon, don't what? Don't tell the truth. We've been living a lie, Mina. Both of us. You've been feeling guilty for falling for your sister's boyfriend. But I wasn't really her boyfriend anymore, was I? Not in her heart. And I've been feeling guilty for replacing her with you. But maybe what I'm really doing is finally finding something real. His words should have been liberating, but they felt wrong somehow. Mina stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "You think this makes everything okay?" she asked. "You think finding out my sister was cheating somehow gives us permission to be together? Doesn't it?" "No!" The word exploded out of her. "It makes everything worse. Don't you see? If we'd known this from the beginning, maybe we could have built something real. But we didn't. Our entire relationship started because we were both mourning the same person. We bonded over shared grief for a woman who wasn't who we thought she was." Jihoon stood up, reaching for her. "That's not true. What we have is real, Mina. It started with grief, but it became something else, something better." She stepped away from his touch. "How can you be sure? How can either of us be sure our feelings are genuine when they grew out of such complicated soil?" "Because I know how I feel when I'm with you," he said desperately. "Because I know that when you laugh, it lights up my entire world. Because I know that when you're not here, I feel like I'm missing a piece of myself. That's not about Soyeon or grief or guilt. That's about you. That's about us." But Mina was shaking her head. "I need time to think. I need to figure out what's real and what's just complicated emotions wrapped up in family loyalty and guilt and grief." "Mina, please." "No," she said firmly. "I need space, Jihoon. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by being Soyeon's sister, or your secret girlfriend, or the keeper of family secrets. I need to understand my own heart." The pain in his eyes was devastating, but she held firm. "How long?" he asked. "I don't know." He nodded slowly, gathering up the letters and placing them in a neat stack on her coffee table. "I'll wait," he said quietly. "However long you need, I'll wait." After he left, Mina sank back onto her couch and cried until she had no tears left. But beneath the sadness was something else, a tiny spark of relief. For the first time in 2 years, she was alone with her own thoughts, free to figure out what she really wanted without the weight of secrets and guilt pressing down on her shoulders. The weeks that followed were the longest of her life. She threw herself into work, organizing the memorial exhibition with an intensity that worried her colleagues. She avoided the places she and Jihoon had frequented, avoided mutual friends, avoided anything that might tempt her to reach out to him. But avoiding him didn't mean she stopped thinking about him. Late at night, she would replay every conversation they'd ever had, every touch, every moment of connection. She tried to dissect their relationship, to separate the genuine feelings from the complicated circumstances that had brought them together. The memorial exhibition opened on a rainy Thursday in October. Mina had decided to include some of Soyeon's work, but not the letters. Some secrets were too painful to share, even in the name of art. Instead, she focused on her sister's photography, the vibrant images that captured Seoul's beauty and energy. Jihoon came to the opening. She spotted him across the crowded gallery, standing in front of one of Soyeon's photographs, a black and white image of the Han River at sunset. He looked thinner than she remembered, tired, but still heartbreakingly handsome in his dark suit. Their eyes met across the room, and the world seemed to stop. In that moment, Mina felt it. The jolt of connection that had nothing to do with her sister, or guilt, or complicated family dynamics. It was pure, simple attraction and affection for this man who had somehow become essential to her happiness. But before she could cross the room to talk to him, he was gone, slipping out into the rainy night like a ghost. That night, she found a note slipped under her apartment door. "Mina, the exhibition was beautiful. Soyeon would have been proud. You've honored her memory while creating something entirely your own, which is exactly what you've always done. I won't keep waiting indefinitely. I can't. But I want you to know that whether we're together or apart, you've changed my life. You've shown me that it's possible to love again after loss, to find beauty in unexpected places, to be brave enough to risk your heart even when the odds seem impossible. If you decide you want to try again, to build something real together without the shadows of the past, You know where to find me. But if you decide that what we had was just too broken, people leaning on each other while we healed, I'll understand that too. Either way, thank you for showing me that love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Always, Ji-hoon. Mina read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. In his carefully chosen words, she heard everything she'd been struggling to understand about their relationship. Yes, it had started with grief and guilt and complicated circumstances, but it had grown into something else, something real and precious and entirely their own. The next morning, she made her decision. She found him at his favorite coffee shop in Hongdae, the one where they'd had their first real conversation 2 years ago. He was sitting by the window, typing on his laptop, a half-empty cup of coffee growing cold beside him. He looked up when she slid into the seat across from him, and she saw hope and fear war in his expression. "Hi," she said simply. "Hi. I've been thinking about us, about what's real and what's complicated and what's worth fighting for." He closed his laptop, giving her his full attention. And I think you're right. What we have is real. It started in a complicated place, but it grew into something beautiful, something that belongs to us, not to our history or our grief or anyone else's expectations. Relief flooded his face. "Mina." "But," she continued, holding up a hand, "I think we need to start over. Really start over. No more secrets, no more hiding, no more guilt about the past. If we're going to do this, we do it honestly. We tell our families. We face whatever judgment or disapproval comes our way. We build something together that doesn't live in the shadows." He reached across the table and took her hands in his. "Are you sure? Your parents might not understand. People will talk." "Let them talk," she said, surprising herself with her own conviction. "I'm tired of living my life based on what other people think. I'm tired of feeling guilty for being happy. Soyeon is gone, and I'll always miss her, but I can't live in her shadow forever." "And us?" She smiled, the first real smile she'd felt in weeks. "Us, I want to try. I want to see what we can build together when we're not carrying around all that guilt and secrecy. I want to love you openly, honestly, without apology." He brought her hands to his lips, kissing her fingers gently. "I love you, Mina. Not as Soyeon's sister, not as a replacement for what I lost, but as you, as the woman who makes me laugh, who challenges me to be better, who sees the world in ways that constantly amaze me." "I love you too," she said, and meant it completely. "I love your terrible jokes and your messy apartment, and the way you get completely absorbed in your writing. I love how you listen to me, really listen, and how you make me feel like my thoughts and feelings matter." They talked for hours that day, making plans for their new beginning. They would tell their families together, face whatever reactions came their way as a united front. They would move their relationship out of the shadows and into the light, building something honest and real and entirely their own. It wasn't easy. Mina's parents were shocked, hurt, confused by the revelation. Her mother cried, asking how she could do this to Soyeon's memory. Her father was coldly disapproving, questioning her judgment and her loyalty to family. But Mina stood firm, Ji-hoon's hand steady in hers as she explained their feelings, their journey, their decision to choose love over fear. "Soyeon wouldn't want us to be unhappy," she told her parents. "She would want us to find joy wherever we could, to take care of each other, to build something beautiful from the pieces she left behind." Slowly, gradually, her family began to accept the reality of their relationship. It helped that Ji-hoon never tried to replace their memories of Soyeon or minimize their grief. He honored her memory while making it clear that his love for Mina was something separate and new. The gossip and judgment from others was harder to bear. Seoul's social circles buzzed with whispers about the novelist who fell for his dead girlfriend's sister, the girl who stole her sister's boyfriend. But Mina and Ji-hoon faced it together, their love growing stronger in the face of outside pressure. 1 year later, on a crisp autumn evening, Ji-hoon proposed to Mina on the rooftop of her apartment building, with all of Seoul spread out glittering below them. The ring was simple, elegant, nothing like the elaborate design he'd once picked out for Soyeon. This was entirely for Mina, chosen with her quiet taste and gentle beauty in mind. "I know this hasn't been easy," he said, as he slipped the ring onto her finger. "I know people will always have opinions about how we found each other, but I also know that what we have is real, and it's ours, and it's worth every difficult moment we've faced." "Yes," she said, before he could even ask the question. "Yes, to all of it, to the easy parts, and the hard parts, and everything in between." Their wedding was small, intimate, attended only by family and close friends who had learned to accept and support their love. Mina wore a simple white dress that was nothing like the elaborate gown Soyeon had once picked out for her own never-to-be wedding. Everything about their celebration was thoughtfully chosen to reflect who they were as a couple, not shadows of who they might have been. During the ceremony, they lit a candle in Soyeon's memory, acknowledging the loss that had brought them together while celebrating the love that had grown from it. It was a moment of healing, of integration, of honoring the past while embracing the future. In his wedding speech, Ji-hoon said, "Love doesn't always come to us in the ways we expect. Sometimes it grows from loss, from unexpected connections, from finding exactly what we need in the last place we thought to look." Mina taught me that it's possible to honor the past while still reaching for happiness, to carry our losses with us while still opening our hearts to new love. Mina's response was simpler, but no less heartfelt. "They say you can't choose who you love, but I think that's not entirely true. Every day, I choose Ji-hoon. I choose to love him, not despite our complicated beginning, but because of everything we've overcome together. I choose to build a future with him that honors our past while creating something entirely new." 5 years later, they have that future they dreamed of. Ji-hoon's latest novel, inspired by their story, has become a bestseller across Asia. Mina has opened her own gallery, specializing in contemporary Korean artists, with a permanent memorial section dedicated to young artists lost too soon. They live in a small house in Hongdae, close to where their story began, but they've made it entirely their own. The walls are covered with art Mina has curated and photographs from their travels together. Ji-hoon's study is cluttered with books and coffee cups, and Mina's workspace is organized chaos of gallery catalogs and artist portfolios. Sometimes, when they pass certain places in Seoul, the coffee shop where they first talked, the street food stall where they first kissed, the gallery where they realized their love was real, they remember how they started. But those memories don't carry guilt anymore. They carry gratitude for the winding path that brought them together. On quiet evenings, they visit Soyeon's grave together, bringing flowers and sharing news of their lives. They tell her about Ji-hoon's books, about Mina's gallery, about the life they've built together, and sometimes, in the whisper of wind through the cemetery trees, they imagine they hear her approval, the sister who would want Mina to be happy, who would understand that love sometimes grows in unexpected soil. Their story became Seoul's. Most talked about romance, but not for the reasons they expected. Instead of scandal, people saw love that persevered despite impossible circumstances. Instead of judgment, they found inspiration in two people brave enough to choose happiness over convention. Because in the end, that's what their love story was really about. Not the complicated circumstances that brought them together, but the simple choice they made every day to love each other honestly, completely, without apology or explanation. In a city of 10 million people, they had found each other across an impossible divide. And in choosing to love despite the odds, they had created something beautiful, something lasting, something entirely their own. Love, they learned, doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes it asks you to be brave enough to write your own story, even when the world thinks it knows how your story should go. And sometimes If you're very lucky, that brave choice leads to a love worth every risk you took to find it.